Hey everybody, Ragnarok here, going over my third game for the Philly Open where I played in the under 1600 section. This game is similar. This was round 6. I ended up losing this game also. I think my opponent was around 1490. Unfortunate loss, but I definitely could have played it better. And the problem is I put myself into a scenario where I had to play perfectly from early on, and that's really not a good place that you want to be. I do have some opportunities that I could have won, and I think I might try this again in other times. But this is a game that the same thing happened in round 2 where I won that game, and I guess I thought I'd try it again in this round. But unfortunately I lost, but I was playing as white. He played c5 against e4 for the Sicilian. Knight to f4, knight f3, d6 as normal, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight to f6, knight to c3, and then a6, the Najdorf. So the Najdorf really kind of blocks your knights from coming to this square. There we go, to the b5 square, because that's a really strong attack on not only c7 but also d6. And if your opponent ever plays e5 or e6, the d6 pawn becomes weak. So that's why the Najdorf kind of allows you to play e5 because of that. So I played bishop to e3. e6, as I just mentioned, he could have also played e5, but it's a different variation. I played f3, blocking the knight from coming in and attacking my bishop. You'll notice this formation is very similar in the Yugoslav attack against the dragon, which I've highlighted a couple of previous videos. He plays bishop to e7, queen d2, queen c7, queenside castle, and then here's the pivotal move. I think he should castle first, but he plays b5, which allows me to do this really cool maneuver, which I really like. It's a trade of a bishop for 3 pawns. The way it works is, because you see this this square, as I mentioned, you're attacking the c7 square if you have a knight there. Because the queen is there now on c7, you get a nice tempo on it. So it goes like this, with bishop taking b5 check. King has to either move or block, and if he blocks, then you just move your bishop away and you've won a pawn. So he takes back. I take back with the d knight, attacking the queen, but also attacking d6. His queen moved away. Just as a quick side note, the main goal here is to take this pawn. I think that looking at it afterwards, if I pushed e5 here, I think it probably would have been a little bit better, because I put another piece on here and I'm attacking his knight. If his knight moves away, let's just say, now this is just awful for him. I'm attacking his bishop, and if it moves, check. Pretty freaking close to mate, actually, but it's not mate, you just win a piece. So the knight can't move away. But if the knight takes, I believe the best answer here would be, I could either check. The point is I'm giving up this pawn. I don't think it's quite mate, because if that bishop weren't there, queen would take queen, checkmate. But I think best probably would be to, let's see, if I check, what's the main goal here? Let's just look at a couple scenarios. I could check him first. He kind of has to move away, and then I think maybe just trade. Yeah, this looks better for white. Way better. You win a piece. So if his king moves in front of the queen here, this is just going to win a queen right away. King has to block, or block check, and then a couple different options there. Taking the queen right away is one of them. So this is probably more crushing than what happened in the game. If he moves here, I could probably just take right away. I've got a tempo on the rook. It's just really bad position for him. But I think, so again, yeah, I would probably try this in the game, but push e5 there instead. But what I did can potentially work. I take here, so now again I've got 3 pawns for my piece, and that's not always a scenario you want to put yourself into. But the beautiful thing is I have these 3 pawns. Eventually, the idea is that they'll progress together towards the end of the board, because his bishop takes the knight, queen takes back, queen takes, rook takes, castle, and connect my rooks. Neither one of his knight or bishop has developed, and now I want to start progressing my pawns. He doesn't have any pawns to block them, and the main thing, and I kept this in mind but I didn't really adhere to it, is if you can reduce some of the pieces to just have his rooks. Rooks are terrible against pawns in the endgame, especially if they're connected and the rooks have to stay in front of it. They're eventually going to have to trade themselves for them. So I had some opportunities where I could have traded off pieces, and I definitely should have. But I'll show you some ideas here. He just develops as normal, but the beautiful part of this pawn structure is this bishop can't do much. That's what makes it so nice. I start pushing b4, which is a bit of a mistake because I think better would be b3, because going b4, his knight could potentially create some weaknesses or take advantage of these weaknesses, as you'll see. Knight comes in here, bishop with a potential attack, x-ray on the rook. And at this point, he's trying to prevent any possible checkmates. I definitely could have just taken his knight, as I was mentioning. If he takes back, I take his rook, and now he has less pieces to combat. I think I would just push b5, bishop moves away. I've got these two pawns coming. This knight can't easily come over. He'd have to go back and then over here. Not really too much time. In the meantime, my king would start progressing up to prevent that, prevent any damage. But, you know, I think this would have been much better for me, for sure. But what happened in the game was b4. Again, all of this transpired. I played a4. Bit of a mistake. I definitely should have taken that knight because it consolidates things, makes it a little bit simpler. He gets out of the x-ray attack from the bishop, and then I decided to bring my king up. And then he plays an interesting move here. I did see this coming. I actually saw this whole thing coming, but I decide at this point to not take, because if I take, my only advantage, this is just a trade by the way, my only advantage is these three pawns. And now I've got two a pawns doubled up. It's just not really an ideal structure. They're not easily going to progress. I mean, maybe in this scenario I could go here, maybe push c4. Maybe there's ideas, trade the rooks off. It might be okay, but I didn't like the idea of it. So I pushed e5, knowing that there's this fork here where the knight can take both pieces, which is what he does. Check. My king goes up to b3. Knight takes, and now I've got a fourth pass pawn, even though I'm down the exchange. I thought this was better for me, but I just totally messed up, I guess. 4 pawns. The problem is this c-pawn needs to be where this bishop is. If it is, it's a pretty much instant win in my book, but it wasn't. So he puts his knight behind the pawn. Makes sense because he has to block it. Bishop goes back. Rooks connect. The idea is being that he could have potentially start doing some checks once this bishop gets out of the way, because this pawn won't be able to take anything. And here's where a couple of my mistakes start going. I push b5. I think that's okay. King comes in. King moves up. That's fine. Just kind of really blocking this square again. This bishop's doing nothing. He almost can't even move. And if he goes here, I mean, that's not good at all for him. Probably just slide my other rook over and pretty good easy win, I think. He moves his king. Huge mistake here. I move my knight. What I missed was just the basic fact that my c-pawn's dropping. Huge mistake. I struggled to get this knight out of the way. Maybe it could have moved back and then pushed forward. Even better, maybe just move my rook up here, defend this pawn, and then go here. But the main goal, the reason I moved the knight, was because I knew he wanted to take. I wanted him to take. Because now it's just less pieces in my way. That bishop was kind of preventing some pawns from moving forward. Because in this situation, if I move forward, he can just take the pawn. I can't take back. So I wanted to get it out of the way and then push c4. But unfortunately, I did it in a weird order where he takes my knight, and now he takes the pawn. It's essentially a loss from this point, but I think I had some good chances. If I played it a little bit differently, it would have been a much better game. But let's go through the rest of the game anyway. Again, I am down the exchange. I'm actually down an entire rook, so my whole advantage of 4 passed pawns is turned into 3, but his king is now blocking one of them. It's just not as good. King goes back. I don't know why he doesn't take the g-pawn. He actually gives me some nice chances to come back. I just protect the bishop. He attacks my rook. I have to move my rook. King comes in. Bishop moves. I kind of like, I like this, having these pawns all kind of working together. If he did take this pawn, I think I was just going to start moving some pawns up, and it would have been, well, maybe not right away, actually, because the b pawn's hanging. I think the main goal, I don't know why he didn't take. Maybe I could have just moved in here, attack the rook, and then start pushing. Something like that might be okay. But instead, he didn't take, and he moves over here, which I didn't see the main reason why, but I just move here trying to attack and check his king. The main reason is because he's pinning my piece. And he's not winning a piece, but less pieces I have, the better for him. So I check him, and then I take his rook. And this is a little bit of a key situation here too. I move my bishop up. This is a nice position. I can now start pushing my pawn. It's pretty safe along the way. The problem is I can't easily get there. So I push this pawn first, because if I push this pawn here, I think he has check. If I come forward, this actually might win for me. Yeah, I don't think that's what he would do. I think he would take this pawn, move here. I don't know. That might not be bad, but a couple ideas here. He could just take, check. He's up 4 pawns to 3, and he's going to win this piece. There's no easy way to block it. So that would be one way out of it for him. So I decided to push a5, because after his check and I move forward, I actually thought he was going to take this pawn, in which I would start pushing. And if he takes the pawn, I think I would take back, king takes, move in, and try to do something with these 2 pawns against the rook. This is kind of the ending I was envisioning, except in this ending, I have another pawn, and it should be a pretty easy win from there. Because the rook's going to sacrifice himself for 1, maybe 2 pawns, probably only 1. And having the other 2 pawns with a king near it, which is why I marched my king all the way up with the pawns, that would have been really nice. And I think that it would have been enough to win. But this is a pretty big learning point, because a lot of people play this against me, and I get an opportunity to do this attack. And I think it's strong. It's just not always 100% going to work. So let's go back to the main line. So let's go back to the whole check here. He checks, I move forward, and he blocks with his knight, which is a smart move, because now if I push this piece, he's double attacking my a5 pawn. So instead I push the a pawn, because yes, he has an attack over here, but I thought this was a little better for me. We trade king, I come into a5. And here's a pretty big mistake. I think I could have won this game even from here. Check. If he moved here, I think I'm okay, because I think he has these extra pawns over here. I might be able to get back in time. I'm not 100%. Check. No, I think it's still probably a loss. Let's go back though. Well, I'll show you what actually happened, and then kind of ideas here. So check. He actually moved to c8, and for whatever reason, I missed this obvious fork, attacking his rook and his king. Would it have been a win? I don't know, but let's take a look. Check. You win the piece back, and this was the whole idea I wanted. I wanted this pawn to at least be a distraction, so my king can start moving over here and get these pawns. In this situation, he probably would play g4. I might even take. This probably would be a win, yeah. King moves over, because I mean this pawn's not going to queen, but the thing is it's blocking his king from coming over here. I'm not sure what he does to easily win this game. This looks like a huge win for white now. Doesn't really matter. Yeah, that definitely would have been a win. I missed that point there. Yeah, I mean, even if he did anything else, if he moves his king away, this looks like a pretty big win too. The whole idea is that these 2 pawns against this rook, he has to trade one of them, and I queen the other one. That's the main idea. But if we go back a few other moves, let's go back to that c8 or b8 move. Oops, c8, possibly a win. I think probably just start moving my king over. He can't move his king here because of the same idea. And his rook's just stuck in the corner. So if he plays g4, whoops, if he plays g5, f5, sorry. I can't easily move my king here, though. It might be better. Yeah, it's tough in this situation, because the main problem is if I check him and he comes forward to stay in front of the pawns, and I start moving this way, he just blocks me off. Now I completely can't get over here for my king. It's a different situation. Even if I try to queen, I think he takes with king. Not much really I can do. You could probably just take this pawn at this point. Even just block this. Or even just over here. Because there's no immediate... Oh, no, yeah, he has to keep his rook there. Never mind. Probably go back here. Check. Maybe. But I think this is too far. He could just start pushing this. And it's just a loss from there. So some opportunities I could have won. I think the main problem was me dropping that c2 pawn, but now I know in the future. I think it is a very specific game. You have to play perfectly for it to work, but it's definitely doable, and I will try it again in the future. So let me know what you guys think of this video. Please subscribe if you haven't already. More guides coming out on ragchess.com. Definitely check those out, and I will see you next week where we review the next game from the Philly Open. See you then.